It was actually John who noticed it before me, and he goes, "Did you hear that sound?" And I said, "What sound?" So we were really quiet, and so we started to slowly walk again, and I literally heard something pacing us, and then little sticks and pine cones started being thrown at us. And John is starting to freak out because nobody is answering us, and started to worry me just a little bit too. And then I started to hear kind of like what sounded like snorts. I was no expert by that time, but I was familiar enough with sounds that I knew that wasn't any deer. Couldn't really figure out what it was, but I knew for certain it took hands to throw. And then I looked up as the sun was kind of peeking up, but I could literally see a silhouette just below the top, and it was just massive. And I said, "What the hell is that?" John looks up, and he just went white as a ghost.
This is Bigfoot Crossroads. My name's Matt, and I'd like to welcome Mark to the show. Mark is somebody who's just telling me he's been listening for years, back since before Bigfoot Crossroads was even a thing. And just by random occurrence, Mark, I ran across a comment you had left on an episode probably about a year ago. And it caught my attention specifically for the state of Oklahoma, of course. But yeah, man, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, let's just go back to, I guess, when you were 14 years old, if you don't mind kind of walking us through what happened.
Well, I'm sure it's the same as in most states. Deer hunting season comes around, and if you have a note from your parents, you can get out of school for a week, I think it was, to go deer hunting.
Right.
With your folks. At least that's how it is in the Rockies in Utah. So I was able to go again with my stepdad, his brother, and a friend of mine named John who came along with us. And if anybody who's listening is familiar with this area, we were up there at the top of Fairview Canyon. There's a lake up there. And this was in the 70s, mind you. I'm 59, so a long, long time ago. And there were like Jeep trails and everything that people just kind of made their own roads off the side of the lake through the quaking aspens and pines.
Right.
And we pulled into what was like the bottom of a small draw that had a stream coming down it. It's October. And there's little teeny patches of snow, if you will. And my dad and uncle said they were going to go to the top of the draw. We were in a soft top Jeep. And they told me and John, give it, an hour and a half. And they wanted us to come up the right side of the draw, making as much noise as possible, throwing things down into the bottom of the draw to hopefully push any deer there. It's mule deer here, not whitetail.
Yeah.
Towards them. And they would not fire towards the right side of the draw. So, that's what we did. And boy, to tell two 14-year-old boys to make as much noise as they want when you've been told be as quiet as you can deer hunting. We were just tooting it up, chucking rocks and sticks down in the draw and just talking with each other. And it was actually John who noticed it before me. And he goes, "Did you hear that sound?" And I said, "What sound?" And he goes, I don't know, maybe a buck snort." It was his first time hunting, actually. And I didn't actually hear it. So we were really quiet and kind of stopped on the, we were in the middle of the right side of the draw because you don't want to be silhouetted on the top of the ridge.
Right.
And you can't shoot till the sun comes up. So it's dark too. So the sun hasn't come up quite yet. It's just, it's still behind the mountains, but it's lightening up. And so we started to slowly walk again, and I literally heard something pacing us on the right side. And then little sticks and pine cones started being thrown at us. And I thought it was my stepdad and uncle messing with us. So I was hollering up the side of the hill, telling them, "Hey, knock that off. I thought we were supposed to be deer hunting and being quiet."
Yeah.
That's not funny. How are you going to get any deer? And John is starting to freak out because nobody is answering us, and started to worry me just a little bit too. I had a 22 pistol on my side, way illegal, in a holster on my side, and I gave John my knife because he had nothing. But you're supposed to be 21 for a pistol, but it beat having nothing in the mountains.
Right.
And then I started to hear kind of like what sounded like snorts, maybe grunts is probably better than snorts. And been hunting since I was 12. You take hunter safety at 12. So I was no expert by that time, but I was familiar enough with sounds that I knew that wasn't any deer, but I didn't know what it was. I started thinking black bear. Gosh, we're a long ways from the top of the draw still. We're not hearing, my stepdad's name was Dave and his brother's name was Terry, and we're not hearing anything from those guys. So I just kind of couldn't really figure out what it was, but I knew for certain it took hands to throw.
Yeah.
And nothing hit us. But it was like beside us and would bounce in front of us on the side of the hill and just roll down. And then I looked up as the sun was kind of peeking up. It'd be probably, after 6 is when it comes up from behind the mountain we were on. It starts to get really bright, and you're blinded by it because we were facing east, so it's in our face. But I could literally see a silhouette just below the top. And it wasn't wearing hunter orange. I could tell that much. And it was just massive. And I said, "What the hell is that?" to John. It was another cool thing without the grown-ups there, is you could swear.
Sure.
And John looks up, and he just went white as a ghost. And he goes, "I don't know. Let's get the hell out of here." So we literally ran to the bottom of the draw, and we start zigzagging. It's just a little teeny, not even really a stream, but kind of like from melting snow going down the draw towards where the Jeep was parked. So we started heading back for the Jeep. We bagged, making it all the way to the top of the draw because something was there. Even if it was just another adult messing with us, it wasn't right. Well, as we're zigzagging down this draw, I noticed gigantic footprints in the bottom of the draw, kind of next to this small stream. And I'm trying to get John to notice it, and he's just freaking out. He's actually crying. John actually pissed himself. I don't know if it was okay to say that.
Yeah. I mean, it happens.
Yeah, he wet himself. And we made it back to the Jeep. There's no keys in it. It's a soft top. And I'm thinking, I remember in 6th grade, I had seen in a local theater the Patterson-Gimlin film. And I thought, no way. And I thought there was only one, if there was one, and that it existed in California. I'm only 14, so I'm not grasping that they could be anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's all I could come up with because I was familiar enough in the 2 years of hunting to know that took hands to throw, and that was nothing I'd ever seen hunting before, even just the silhouette. It was just way too big as I'm thinking about it. So I'm laying on the horn because they have the keys. I'm hoping the sound will bring them there. And I'm thinking as if we keep looking at the opening of the draw, there's like this little grassy field, small circular field right at the bottom of the draw where the Jeep was parked. And I kept waiting for whatever it was to bust out of that draw and come and eat us, kill us, I don't know. But nothing came out. And probably like 2.5, 3 hours later, they come down the draw. It just mattered in hell that we never made it up to where they were. And we tried telling them what happened, and they just made fun of us and said if it was anything, it was a bear. So we go to middle school, and we tell our science teacher this, and he apparently was way more interested in it than I was and knew way more about what it could have been than a 14-year-old kid. So he asked if he thought if he got our parents' permission, if they would take us back up there, because I told him about the footprints that we saw.
Yeah.
And so he had plaster of Paris, and my stepdad went back with us. Terry didn't, but went back with us and made plaster casts. And this is like after the hunt, mind you, and prints were way old by then. and because we could only be gone for the week. So they were at least, I don't know how old they were when we saw them, to tell you the truth, but I'm guessing relatively recent if it was there on the side of the hill.
Yeah.
And so he had us passing these casts around the class and then telling the story to the class.
Oh, wow.
And gosh, had I thought about it, I should have asked for one of those casts, because he kept them both. And that was like my big story, and I never told anyone about it. And I only deduced what it was because of my Fort Sill, Oklahoma experience. Because that was a blatant, I saw it. Less than, well, probably 10 feet from me.
Oh, wow. I wonder what happened to those casts, you know? That's interesting that your science teacher had such an interest in the subject at that point in time, because it's not like it is today, as you know.
No.
Not very many people were into it back then.
No, the 70s. This was probably 76, I'm guessing. 59, 76, 77.
Yeah, and that was actually a time in history when there was a lot of Bigfoot sightings, at least being talked about for whatever reason. I think maybe the legend of Boggy Creek had something to do with it. It was more in the public's eye and everything, but
yeah, I remember that movie. In fact, I think I own it. Legend of Boggy Creek.
Yeah. So how many years later was it whenever Fort Sill happened?
Okay, well, I was in the field artillery. That was my second MOS in the Army to make sergeant. And back then, I have no clue what it's like today. You had to have 2 MOSs, which means 2 jobs you're qualified for to make sergeant. And I was a corporal at the time. And we were pulling field guard, me and a PFC, a private first class, on the West Range. I lived in Lawton. I'm sure you're familiar with Lawton.
I am.
Armpit of the world.
Yeah. Spent some time there, more than I would have hoped for.
Yep, the Goodyear plant, and Fort Sill is about all there is.
Yeah.
And so we're on the West Range, and every hour on the hour, we're supposed to call back to headquarters on the field radio and make a radio check. And I would send the PFC to the west, and it's self-propelled artillery. There were 8-inch howitzers and 155 howitzers. And they were all lined up in like a concave view, facing downrange for the trainees that would come out there the next day. And we were in what's called a GP medium. Again, it's really cold. It was November, I believe. It was either October or November again. I just remember it was cold. Not a lot of snow in Oklahoma. If they get flurries, the whole post shuts down. Lots of rain, but not a lot of snow. So anyway, I sent the PFC to the west, and I went to the east. And you have your M16A1s. They were then same rifles that were used in Vietnam. Nothing new when I was in the military yet. In fact, we still wore what they called the steel pots. They weren't the Kevlar helmet yet. They had a liner and a steel pot. But I'm walking down the east side of the guns, and most of Fort Sill, if you're familiar with it, is Indian reservation still that the government rents.
Right.
And in fact, we ran by Geronimo's grave every day and rappelled off of Medicine Bluff, where he escaped the cavalry on his horse at least once a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a real interesting place. You could go to Cannon Walk and even see the little cell that they kept Geronimo in. And it's about the size of an outhouse.
It's crazy.
But anyway, it's by the time I got back to the field phone to make the check, back then we were still using the black Skillcraft government pens that say U.S. government on them, and you were still writing written field reports. You kept a literal log, a written log of every hour on the hour and what time you made your radio check to the minute and seconds. And as I'm walking to the east, I literally heard a growl. And the first thing I thought was, that a coyote? So I start walking slow. We have blanks is all we have, and the PFC is to the west, and these guns are stretched out a long way. There were 16 guns. So between each gun is at least 20, 30 feet.
Yeah.
And then behind them is a tarp where all the rounds will go underneath it and the powder charges for each round that you fire. So as I'm walking beside them, now the 155s, they're almost like a gigantic tank. You can ride inside of them, inside the turret. And you load them like the ammo stored in the back. But the 8-inch ones, the biggest ones, you rode on the outside. There was nothing really enclosed except the driver's hatch. Well, I'm walking beside a 155, and I had to take my selector switch, and I turn it to auto, because I'm thinking if it's a coyote, I'll rip some blanks off and scare it away. And I heard another growl. And I looked up, and there, standing, and the barrels are kept elevated at a 45-degree angle with a canvas bag over the end to keep dust, leaves, dirt, moisture from getting inside till the fire mission. Mm-hmm. It's standing literally underneath the very end of that, and it's probably 10 feet to the bottom of the barrel, the end of the barrel from the ground up. And it's standing underneath that. And it growled again. And I literally felt it in my chest, and the M16 handguards vibrated, and it has an ejector flap for the brass, the spent brass, to come out the right side. That metal flap was vibrating too. And I knew instantly when I looked at it what I saw when I was 14. The pieces like fell together in light speed. And I literally started talking to it, begging it not to hurt me. I just wanted to go back to the tent. And I started backing up ever so slowly, not taking my eyes off of it. I don't remember how many steps it was, but because it's so cold out there, there's also 55-gallon drums behind the guns that are filled with wood, so the trainees can keep their hands warm between rotating and fire missions. Yeah. And I bumped into this barrel, but I literally thought it was another one of them, because I just felt this bonk behind me against my butt. And instant reflex, I turned to look behind me. And it's just the fire barrel. And my head whips back around to the front, and it's not there. It's gone, like it was never freaking there. Wow. So I'm looking around, and I'm looking around, and I'm listening. I mean, my hearing is straining for the snap of a twig, the crunch of a leaf, anything. And I didn't hear nothing. It was like a vacuum. So I slowly kind of walk on the tips of my boots, if you will, the fronts of my toes, to make as least sound as possible, to go back to the tent where the wood burning stove was and the field phone and stuff. And I got there first, and I went in the flap, and I sat down. There's a little folding desk and table, not really desk, and a chair, and then the field phone on top of it for calling headquarters, and then the log right there. And literally a wind-up clock for every hour on the hour, and 2 cots and the wood-burning stove. And as soon as I sat down, it's like the adrenaline or the rush set in, and I just shook like a leaf. I had a hard time wrapping my head around what just happened and what had happened at 14. It was mind-boggling how both those 2 pieces came together for me. And then I hear the tent flap, and I freak out, and I spin around, pointing my M16 at the flap. Don't know why, but it's my weapon. Oh, we had hand grenade simulators too. Picture a glorified M80. Yeah, I've played with those a couple times. Yeah, okay. All there is a big boom, right? Yeah. Like a flashbang, if you will. And we had those as well. But I turned around thinking it was coming in the tent to get me. I hadn't even given a thought, except did they get him, to the PFC. Hendricks was his name, actually. And it was him coming through the canvas flap. And he goes, "What the hell was that?" And I said, "You heard that?" He said he heard the growl too. He says, "Was that a coyote?" And I said, "It was no damn coyote." And he sat on the edge of his bunk, and I told him everything that happened when I was 14, and then what I saw at the end of that 155 millimeter howitzer barrel, and what had happened, and how the handguards around the barrel vibrated and how the ejector port flap vibrated. And he's watching me write this down. He goes, "Are you calling this in and telling them what happened?" And I said, "Well, if you don't say exactly what happened out here, I mean, they have you so brainwashed that if you leave out one little tiny thing, your ass is grass."
Yeah.
So I wrote it all down, every bit of it down, and I called headquarters and told them. And I was literally arguing with the CQ, charge of quarters, back at headquarters that you reported to in the middle of the night, early morning, every hour on the hour, about what happened. And he goes, "Did you write that in the log?" And I said, "Of course I did. I'm supposed to write everything that happens in the field in that book." And he goes, "You have no idea what you've done." And he goes, "Call back call back for your next hour checkup." And literally, the captain of my battery, Bravo battery, showed up with the XO, a first lieutenant, like 2 hours before anybody else. Oh, and a range master. They're the ones who control the firing ranges you're on, be it a rifle or artillery. They like watch for fires from the tracers, from the explosions, all that stuff. And they have me explain it all and write it all in a separate written report. And they also had a typed NDA that they told me to sign or my career was over. So I said, what do you want me to sign that for? And they said, because you're not allowed to talk about this until at least 20 years after your honorable discharge. And I said, why? What's the big deal? And they wouldn't answer me. They just said, just do what you're ordered to. I was a corporal. What you're ordered to, corporal. So I signed it. And I didn't even tell my wife that I was married to for 28 years until 21 years into our marriage what happened at 14 or at Fort Sill. Because who's going to believe me? I mean, clear back then, you were laughed at.
Yeah.
Hell, you still kind of are.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not a researcher or nothing. I just know what happened to me twice. But it did from all the years that I've been through this, they're even in my dreams, Matt, sometimes. Not all the time, but they're in my dreams. And it's never pleasant. I gathered that he didn't like the weapons, the artillery. He didn't like the M16 in my hands. Not that he knew, their nomenclature, but he obviously knew they were something not good or natural.
Right.
And I thought that's why he was growling. Not specifically me, but everything that was in his living room, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really bizarre. And I finally told her, and she didn't believe me. She made me promise not to tell the kids, and I waited till they were teenagers. I have 7 grown children. They all know. Some believe me, some don't. I have a daughter, actually, that goes to my son's in Homer, Alaska for the summer sometimes. She's the youngest. She claims to have seen one there because my son built his own home outside of Homer up in Alaska.
Wow.
He's never seen anything, but she claims to have from riding in the back of the car with him. So for fear of what they threatened me with for the longest time, I didn't tell anybody about it, except maybe a few times once I was out, you'd be around a campfire having beers and your lips get a little loose.
Right.
And you start sharing things with people, and some people would believe me and some wouldn't. Some would just laugh, tell me I had too much to drink. And so I just kind of clammed up about it. And then all of a sudden it started to become this gigantic thing. When this started to become a bigger thing, I just, at my age, which was 10 or more years ago, I just started saying, you know what, I don't care anymore who believes me or not. I was there. In fact, I've even got pictures of prints I can send you behind our motorcycle clubhouse, like 7 miles from my house. There's this huge irrigation ditch that runs down from, there's a river that comes out of American Fork Canyon, which is Mount Timpanogos. They have the Alpine Loop at the top. Well, this big, deep, it's probably 10, 12 feet deep runoff irrigation ditch that's nothing but mud. It's not concrete. It's all dirt. Goes behind and through all these homes. And I'm in a motorcycle club here. And our clubhouse is behind the president's house. And in the summer and fall, that ditch will run constantly, but it wasn't running. And there's like this little deck built out into it, a wood thing you can walk out on. So I walk out there and there's little pools of water and there's mule deer prints and literally tracks following those prints.
Wow.
So I started taking pictures, and I'll actually send those to you.
Yeah.
And also some gigantic structures. I don't know. I'm sure you're familiar with the structures.
Yeah.
And those are literally in the canyon straight behind my house. I can send you a picture of the canyon right behind my house and the structures that I found up there 3 years ago. And those still change to this day. Well, when I go up there, I'll compare the pictures, and there's either something taken away or added. It could have been somebody doing it. There's not a regular hiking trail up there. There's just game trails that I follow. I don't like taking the beaten path. That's not how you find deer.
Let me ask you some questions about that Fort Sill incident.
Sure.
First, I mean, obviously you got a pretty good look at it. What did it look like to you?
The one in Oklahoma was auburn that I saw. Well, it looked auburn. It's not as auburn as I am. And like I said, it was at least to the bottom of that barrel, give or take a few inches, maybe 6 inches, close to 10 feet tall. I would have guessed the weight, being a lifelong hunter, at 1,000 pounds, maybe 11, 12. Width at the shoulders, probably 4.5 feet, maybe 5. A nose like our nose, but it was fat, more flat. And you got to remember, this is all in a panic glimpse. So everything I'm thinking about is all the years of it going through my head, trying to remember every little tiny detail that I can.
Sure.
And there was no smell. I never smelled anything either time at 14, or I guess I would have been in my mid-20s, late 20s at Fort Sill, because I joined at 17 with my mom's signature. So I was still pretty young.
What time of day was it in Oklahoma?
Oh, this was like at 2:30 in the morning, because we had to make the next radio check at 3 o'clock, 0300 hours.
And I would assume this was an artillery range, so...
Yeah, the West Range.
Not very much tree cover in the area, or...
Behind the guns were some trees, but in front of the guns, just firing range.
Yeah.
Oh, and like broken down trucks and old artillery pieces that you would fire on with direct fire. That's where you lower your barrel line of sight, in other words.
Right.
You're not shooting with deflection and azimuth where you lob the round at it, because you can literally hit a garbage can 13 miles away with a charge 7 of powder with either of those two artillery pieces. The old metal 33.5 gallon galvanized garbage cans. That's how accurate they are.
Had there been any artillery fire that day?
No. In fact, it was our battery that was out there for the next group of trainees, the next cycle of artillery trainees that were training to become 13 Bravos cannon crewmen. And we just happened to be assigned to be in the field. In fact, further down from me and the PFC were some trainees, but that was like the next unit down. They weren't part of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no idea if anything happened with them or not.
Did you ever talk to the other guy about it?
Well, I tried to, but they literally told us, no, they separated us, in fact, and interviewed us separately. And when we got back to the unit, he lived on post. I lived off post because I had a wife and 2 young sons at the time. And so he lived on post in the barracks. And the last thing I wanted to do was live where I spent the majority of my life.
Right.
So I took the off-post housing instead. And, I tried talking to Kendrick several times about it. And he would just flat say, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not supposed to talk about it. Neither of us are. We signed those NDAs. And I would always wait for a private moment, because he was in the same battery I was. So I saw him every single day for PT, physical training in the morning. And when we go to the field, I literally saw this guy all day long, every day. for inspections, everything, but he wouldn't talk about it. Matter of fact, John quit being my friend at 14 over it, and I still see him occasionally over the years at like an outdoor concert or something here in Utah, and he refuses to talk about it. And after that all happened, after that year of middle school, he kind of quit wanting to hang around me and being my friend, and that always really puzzled me. But I, all through all the years, it seems to me two things happen. You either become so terrified that you never want to go wherever it happened again, be it the mountains, the woods, or you become almost as addicted as a junkie into trying to figure out why what are they, and where they come from. And I don't have answers for any of that, other than I know that Native Americans knew about them long before we did.
Yeah, I mean, here we are, you know, a couple old junkies years later.
Right.
Still talking about it.
I can't not.
It sounds like from your experience, and I'm not taking away anything from the experience that you had when you were 14. To me, these are both individual experiences, and they're both very interesting. But the one involving the military, especially because you reported this, just doing what you were trained to do, and they shut it down. But it sounds like they didn't really doubt what you saw, and that they had some sort of prior knowledge of what you saw.
Oh, Matt, I 100%, 110% believe they absolutely know about it. As a matter of fact, in the 50s, in the state of Washington, the Army Corps of Engineers, in their field manual, their FM, would list all the flora, fauna, and wildlife that was indigenous to the state of Washington and Oregon and California, and Sasquatch is in it. I found a copy at an Army surplus store.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it. I've never seen one in person, but I mean, why is that in there? You know, it's just listed right along with all the other flora and fauna that military personnel might encounter while on duty.
Yep, and wildlife, yep.
And I've seen other government documentation. I've seen hunting regulations that include Bigfoot and skunk apes and everything else.
Yep, as a matter of fact, that town in New York, I think, passed a law that said it was illegal to hunt them.
Yeah. Why do you think the military wanted to keep it quiet? What is it about these things that they're so afraid of?
I don't know as they're afraid, but to me, hopefully getting wiser in my older age, knowledge is real power, right?
Sure.
And it's like the whole UFO thing too. All of a sudden they start popping out with films and admitting that now they're trying to change the language and call them UAPs instead of UFOs.
Right.
You know, why is all that happening? Are they gently breaking stuff to us? I've never personally seen a UFO, but I've lived long enough to know we've been lied to our whole lives about what's real and not real, just because of things I've encountered. I think it's about power and control for them. Also, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but the Russian military was literally trying to develop, just from my own, oh gosh, I'm going to use the word research. I was literally I don't like go into the mountains looking for the thing or nothing, but I wanted to understand what happened.
Sure.
So, you know, all these different countries, Russia, it's the Yaren, Amnesty. Yaren is China. And they were literally trying to develop some type of super soldier ape man in a race against the United States. I wondered that, but I don't think it was anything developed by our government, because it goes back before our government with the Native Americans. So I don't think that. To me, I think it's a whole power trip to them. They don't want us knowing any more than we need to be good little hive workers. But they certainly know. The military is 100%. There's that case in Seattle where they talk about the Huey. It was either Huey or Sky Crane. It was lifting that cargo net full of the burned bodies of them from when Mount St. Helens blew.
Yeah. And there seems to be a lot of reports that come from around military bases. And the areas that the military bases are at seem to be active hotbeds as well.
Yeah, I've literally heard of them being witnessed inside of nuclear weapons facilities. They like somehow get over that fence.
Yeah.
And they're literally witnessed by the guards there. I mean, it's to most of it, it's just not a secret anymore. If you've unfortunately seen them, you'd be lying if you said they weren't real.
So in your situation, like we were talking about, not much cover in the area. You didn't hear it walk off. You didn't see it running off.
Nope.
Granted, I would assume it was pretty dark in the area.
It was, but your eyes, you got your military angled flashlights, but they're off, and you're out there long enough that your eyes are pretty much adjusted with whatever ambient light that there is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can definitely see everything on that howitzer, to the collimator, which is used for deflection and azimuth, to the left of it at a 45-degree angle, setting out separate from the piece, certainly to the end of the barrel. And I'd say your vision that particular night was 30 feet. And to the end of that barrel from where I was at the middle of the howitzer was maybe 12, 15 feet maximum.
Wow. But
there was literally no smell. And I didn't get the feeling that it was mad at me. It was mad at everything around it. That it wasn't happy with the destruction all around it, if you will. And I'm just spitting in the wind here. That's just my feeling.
Well, no, I mean, that's what we have to go off of. Do you think that your experience whenever you were 14 was connected to this?
I've wondered that many, many times, especially, after the dream things, because in the dreams, when they very occasionally come to me in the dreams, it's not reliving what happened. It's always a new experience, but they're always angry and they're always coming for me. Doesn't matter where I try to hide. And it's always either the black one here in Utah or the Auburn one in Oklahoma. I don't know that they're the actual same ones. Maybe my brain's just thinking of the two colors of hair that, and again, in Utah, it was barely the sun coming over. So the black could have just been because it was silhouetted by a sun barely coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I can't actually say that it was black, but it was dark enough that that's what I supposed it to be at 14 was black hair, and it's absolute hair, not fur.
Yeah.
Once it happens to you, it's always in your mind, and that's very frustrating to me. And I think one of the only ways you kind of keep your sanity about it, it's a whole lot better now because there's people out there that have seen them and they get it. So you have more people to talk to. But man, being a teenager, 14 and experiencing this, it was horrific, man. It was the most terrifying thing that ever happened in my life. I didn't ever want to go deer hunting again, but I was literally forced to every year because my stepdad would use us as, I call it a bird dog. He'd send us out to push game towards them. But it got us out of school, so you kind of dealt with the fear and you just hoped you never saw it again. And I never did, but I'm hyper aware and being a trained military observer, I can track anything in these Rockies. I know what every print looks like. Yeah, I can track a man, so there's no misidentification. It was no black bear. They were not bear. That really irritates me when people say, oh, you saw a bear. That's what my stepdad and uncle said. That was no bear. Bears can't throw.
Did they ever come around and believe that you were right about what you saw, or did you just kind of drop it with them?
I didn't see my Uncle Terry on and off again like every other year, and they would, if I tried to mention something about it, if we went up towards around the same area, I was literally terrified to go back to that same area up Fairview Canyon. You can even look that up on Google and you'll get an idea of where I'm talking about. The top of Fairview Canyon. You'll see the lake. And again, since the mid-70s, the place has changed. I ride the Harley up through there during the summer sometimes, and the place is the roads and everything, and even the trees or the quaking aspens, it's totally different today than it was in the 70s. It was a dirt road then. Now it's paved and goes all the way over into Castledale Canyon, where they have a coal mine for what used to be Utah Power and Light. But from them coming in my dreams and stuff, I always wonder, why me the first time, let alone twice in two different states? And are they connected? Were they connected? I still wonder that. And that's kind of the whole quest, right? You just want to understand. And I got no answers, except I know they're real, and I know what I saw. I even had a witness both times. And I don't understand the whole not wanting to talk to someone who was your best friend at the time over it, or a fellow soldier, that you served with for 2 years every single day.
I was never in the military, but my family members were, and one of my best friends went into the Army whenever he was 30. And, those are your brothers, man.
Right.
You're as close to those people as anybody in your entire life. So yeah, that is really strange, especially since, as you were saying, both of you had to sign those NDAs. The only other person on the planet to talk to is each other. So yeah, that is weird.
Exactly. Even if we would go out, they had a Hard Rock Cafe, but it wasn't like the famous Hard Rock. It was spelled with 2 X's in Lawton at the end of Fort Sill Boulevard. But they would have really good local rock bands there. And even if we'd be out having a beer, I'd try to get him loosened up. I had to talk to somebody about the shit that went down.
Yeah.
It just wasn't normal. And like I said, it like light speed put together what happened at 14. There was just no other explanation. And Kendricks refused. He took the terrified side instead of the addicted and inquisitive side.
Did you ever hear any stories around the base of any other weird stuff?
As a matter of fact, another guy in my unit, his whole last name, he was Choctaw. His exact last name was Holds the Enemy. And he would tell me tribal stories about them all the time. And he'd say, we don't talk about them on the res. But if he had a few beers, he was more than happy. And this was around Mount Scott. I'm sure you're familiar with Mount Scott.
Sure.
And Lake Latonka. It's like a giant pile of rocks to me because I live in the Rockies.
Yeah.
So it's not much of a mountain to me. But he would have all kinds of stories, like fishing with his uncles on Lake Latonka. And they would have rocks thrown at them from Mount Scott in the boulders.
Wow.
And I tried piecing things together many, many years later, where there's so many encounters of like boulder fields, of people disappearing in them and getting rocks thrown at them in there.
Yeah. It's so weird around there, man, because, if you're anybody who has ever been anywhere where there's mountains and then you come to Oklahoma and you see Mount Scott, it really just looks like some giant rocks in the middle of a field. But people go missing there all the time.
Right. It's like somebody put those boulders there.
Yeah.
Because it's so flat everywhere else. The wildlife refuge, everything, it's just flat.
Yeah. People go missing there, disappear. Weird stuff, man. Weird stuff goes on in Oklahoma, period. But yeah, the Lawton area is definitely a strange one.
It is. Well, yeah, and Holds the Enemy, when he would get a little liquored up, and he made it seem like it was a pretty hush-hush thing that they didn't talk about on the res. He brought up the fact that they would steal women, is what he said the tribal elders would tell him, maybe not in his lifetime, but the stories that go back, we've all kind of heard them, if you know anything about the subject, how some were like cannibals and some would steal the women and children. And
none of the old stories paint a very happy, peaceful picture of these things.
No. And you know what? I'll tell you something else that I think personally. I don't think they're an animal. I think they're another species of maybe not.
You've been hunting your entire life. You're very familiar with wildlife.
Absolutely.
Whenever you were looking at this thing, were you looking at an animal or were you looking at something else?
That was not an animal, man. It did. No, that was not an animal. There's no way anyone can make me believe that that is like, say, a bobcat or a mule deer. No, there's intelligence there. There's emotions there. It doesn't help the fact that they look so man-like either. Oh, and this was a man, totally.
I don't normally do this, but could you tell me about your daughter's experience that she believes she had?
Yeah, she'll go and stay with my son Randon and his wife. Brandon's one of my kids that he laughs. He just thinks it's a pops pulling one over on us story. I don't know how he thinks that his whole freaking life, but she claims that they were, I don't remember where they were heading, I guess into town because his cabin, his home that he built is outside of Homer. And she claims that one was behind a tree and it stepped out kind of halfway to the side of it and looked at him as they passed by. And she tried to tell Randon and his wife Shelby about it. And they just kind of laughed at her and said, "Oh, you'll have to tell Pop." So the next time I got to talk to her, she just couldn't wait to tell me about it. And she, they were driving, so they went by so quick that's all she got was a brief glimpse. And she said it was brown because I tried asking her about the color of the hair.
Yeah.
I tried asking her, and now this was probably 7-8 years ago, and she's 21 now, so she was in her teens then herself too. And she had no reason to, out of the blue, all these years later, tell me that she saw a Sasquatch.
One of the things that really fascinates me about this mystery, whenever you look at other life on this planet, the only things you find consistently are things that are extremely great in numbers.
True.
Very large populations of things. For instance, humans. You find humans everywhere. There's a lot of humans. You find birds everywhere. You find deer pretty much everywhere. But these things are extremely rare. But yet, here we're talking about 3 different states just during this episode of where these things are seen. They're seen in virtually everywhere, all over the world.
Right. Only place I don't think I've ever heard of them as far as the United States goes that I'm aware of is Hawaii.
Yeah. As far as North America is concerned, I've even interviewed someone that had a sighting down in Mexico.
Yep. I've heard of Mexico too myself, actually.
These things are everywhere. They live in all different types of habitats and terrain. And I'm still as lost as the very first day.
Amen. Matt, I've even tried to keep a super, super open mind and consider what they used to call the woo factor. I mean, I don't want to ignore any possibility on something I can't figure out
right
in over 45 years. How do the tracks, even in snow, you can follow the tracks and then they'll just stop? They don't lead anywhere. It's almost like the thing vanished or was sucked up or something.
Yeah, I've got no answers. I don't
either.
I've talked to a lot of people, and the conversations have run the gambit.
Right.
From something that acts typically like you would believe just a large primate of some kind would act. But then you have other instances where, like you're saying, that they are very human-like.
Yeah, the skunk apes seem like they're more primate. Ron Moorhead is a friend, actually, and we've all heard the Al Berry Ron Moorhead tapes.
Sure.
And then that Navy cryptolinguist, Scott Nelson, has literally identified speech patterns in it. I mean, can they all do that? I maybe not. I don't know. We're all just guessing, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Just all the puzzle pieces are on the table. We just can't put them together. And we keep adding new pieces. So it can be rough, man. It can be rough. What would you like to see happen, though, in your lifetime? Would you like to see this thing discovered and proven to the world? Should we leave them alone? What are your thoughts?
Kind of twofold. I think they should become a recognized species or branch or tribe, if you will, The Native Americans certainly saw them as another tribe. And every tribe has a name for them. And in fact, Sasquatch is kind of a bastardized version of a Canadian tribe's word for it. And what's another one? Sabe. But I think I would like to see it recognized by science. Science is supposed to discover things and prove them, right? When did science lose interest in discovering new forms of insects or life? Or I think they feel threatened. Maybe that's even part of the government thing. Their power is threatened. Their knowledge is threatened by something that is very much like us. And maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them seem to be capable of speech patterns and intelligent. Maybe not Einstein like us. I don't want to see. I'm sure they've been killed by our government. There's even stories of military kill teams. Vietnam, they call them rock apes, the U.S. soldiers. The Yeti in India. I mean, my gosh, they are everywhere. They might be. I try to look at it this way. We got short people, we got tall people, we got round people, we got thin people. We got black, white, brown. Why would they be any different? Not every dog looks the same. Not every cat looks the same. They all kind of have a certain specific patterns to their hair color or what have you.
Yeah, I kind of believe at this point, and like I say, my opinion can change tomorrow, so don't hold me to this, but I definitely agree that there's some type of human, at least that's the best descriptor that we have for what they are at this point.
For lack of a better...
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe not like us, but not above an animal, if you see humans as above animals, which I know some people...
Are they the so-called missing link?
I mean, who knows? But what I do think is that I agree that the government definitely is aware of them, and they definitely, for whatever reason, don't want to admit to it. And it's not just our government that feels that way. Like we're talking about, they're all over the world, so it's not just the United States keeping it a secret. And
nope.
I kind of think, what would happen? People talk about logging industries and the spotted owl and the money, but what would happen if it came out that there's something else that we share this planet with that's not animal, that's
right,
another type of
human
person? Yeah.
Right.
What would that do? I think that would cause more chaos and turmoil than anything, because you're going way beyond having to go out and do a population count for a little spotted owl before you can continue logging.
There's no one chaining themselves to a tree for that.
Right. Now you're talking about like land ownership rights, human rights,
right.
All sorts of things.
Right.
So yeah, man, it's a can of worms for sure.
I mean, take Native Americans, for example, way back before we came here, right? They don't have a written language. It's all a spoken history, and so oral history was very, very important to them, and to share it correctly to the next generation. They've known for thousands of years. We're the latecomers to it, and I don't think they have any better grasp on it than us, other than they know it exists.
Yeah, I would say that's the major key difference right there. They know it exists, and we're still in the dark on the subject. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your stories with me, man.
Yeah, if you'd like those pictures of the prints and the structures, I'll be happy to send them to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yep, an amazing subject. I appreciate your time.
If you've had an encounter with Bigfoot or something else you can't explain and you'd like to share your story, send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. Check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to social media, past episodes, merchandise, everything you need all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.